Clefairy was originally gonna be the mascot of Pokemon instead of Pikachu, at least in the manga series. In April of 1996, a early manga released called Pokemon Pocket Monsters, where Clefairy was the main mascot. Now exactly a year later, in April of 1997, the anime released, and it was clear that Pikachu was gonna be the main mascot instead. This change was made because it was more recognizable for younger kids. And at the time there weren't really that many yellow mascots besides Winnie the Pooh. In the original Pokemon Red and Blue, you were not able to find Clefable in the wild. You had to evolve a Clefairy. But in the remakes Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee, you can find a Clefable at Mount Moon on the first floor of the cave. But it has an extremely low chance of spawning, in fact it's only 1%. Alola Ninetales is often described in Pokédex entries as a Pokemon that guides and helps travelers who are lost on mountains. Jigglypuff was part of the 12 original characters of the first Super Smash Bros. Game. And of those 12 characters, only 2 of them were Pokemon, which were Pikachu and Jigglypuff. Wigglytuff has currently the highest based HP stat of any fairy type Pokemon, with a total of 140, which is rare amongst fairy types since most of them have their HP base stat lower than 100. Galarian Rapidash might have a soft appearance, however the Pokédex entry of Pokemon Sword says, when Galarian Rapidash uses the move Psycho Cut, it can punch a hole right through a thick metal sheet. Galarian Weezing shares the same height as the legendary Pokemon Xerneas, which is 9 foot 10, making them both currently the tallest fairy type Pokemon. Despite having Mr. in his English name, this Pokemon can either be male or female. This happened because the name Mr. Mime was created for the English release of Pokemon Red and Blue, long before gender was introduced as a game mechanic in Generation 2. Cleffa is the only Pokemon that has a base stat total of 218. Wigglypuff has the highest HP base stat out of all the baby Pokemon by a significant amount. And for reference, the legendary Pokemon Palkia has the same HP base stat, which is 90. Togepi was one of the first Generation 2 Pokemon ever revealed to the public. It appeared in the anime episode Who Gets to Keep Togepi, and this was way before Pokemon Gold and Silver were released. The Togepi saw Misty as its mother because she was the first person it saw upon hatching. Togetic shares its category name, the happiness Pokemon, with one other Pokemon, and that's Blissey. From Generation 3 through Generation 6, Marill was the only Pokemon that could actually change its gender upon evolving. Let me explain why this glitch happened. Azurill has a gender ratio of 75% female and 25% male, but in next evolution Marill has a 50-50 ratio. Because gender was determined by a personality value, roughly 1 in 3 female Azurill would suddenly become male when they evolved into Marill. This bug was finally patched in Generation 6. Azumarill has a gold and yellow shiny, unlike its pre-evolutions Azurill and Marill, who both got green shinies. Snubbull and Shroomish are currently the only Pokemon that evolve at exactly level 23, which is surprising since you would think there are way more Pokemon that evolve at that level. The Pokédex entry from Pokemon Gold says that Granbull is timid and easily spooked, but the Pokédex entry from Pokemon Crystal says the complete opposite of that. It summarizes Granbull as a Pokemon that can scare other Pokemon away simply by opening its mouth wide, revealing its big fangs. In the original Generation 3 games, there was a rare glitch where the rods Wally catches during the tutorial could be a shiny. However, the rods would lose its shiny form when you battled him later in the game, in a rival battle. Galate didn't exist until Generation 4, so for the entirety of Generation 3, the male Curlias could only evolve into Gardevoir at level 30. Gardevoir's name is a combination of the French words garde and devoir, which means guards and duty in the English language. Azurill is the only Pokemon that has a base stat total of 190, which makes it the lowest of all the normal and fairy type Pokemon. There's a specific quest in Pokemon Snap at the Outaway Cave called Look at My Way, where you have to throw a fluff fruit and take a photo of the mawile while it's eating the berry. Mime Jr. was one of the few Generation 4 Pokemon that was revealed before the games Diamond and Pearl were released. The Pokemon was first seen in the episode Sweet Baby James from the mainline anime series called Pokemon Advanced. James received this Pokemon from his grandparents, and after that it became a part of his team. Togekiss is the only fairy type Pokemon that can learn the normal type move Extreme Speed, a move that has 2+ priority and moves before most other moves, even if the opposing Pokemon is faster. Cottony and its evolved form Whimsicott are the only Generation 5 Pokemon who got the secondary fairy typing during the release of Generation 6. Technically Audino got the fairy typing as well, but that's only for the Mega form. Whimsicott has the grass and fairy typing, and this is the only dual type combination where poison type moves can deal 4 times damage, since poison types are only dealing super effective damage against grass and fairy types. Whimsicott shares this typing with Shiinotic and Tapu Bulu. Flabebe is the lightest fairy type Pokemon, coming in at only 0.2 pounds. Now this Pokemon is also the smallest, with a height of only 0 foot and 4 inches, but it shares this height with 2 other Pokemon, which are Cutiefly and Comfy. Eternal Flower Floette got a Mecha evolution in Pokemon CA and is currently the only middle stage Pokemon that can Mecha evolve. Florges has a special defense base stat of 154, making it the second highest out of any non-legendary Pokemon in the franchise, only defeated by Shuckle. The Pokédex entry from Pokemon X and Omega Ruby says that Spritzy emits a scent that enraptures those who smell it, and this fragrance changes depending on what it has eaten. Aromatisse is the only Pokemon with a base stat total of 462. Swirlix and its evolution Slurpuff are the only non-bug type Pokemon that can learn the moves Sticky Web and String Shot. These moves are a reference to the Cotton Candy team this Pokemon has. The Pokédex entry from Pokemon Y and Alpha Sapphire says Slurpuff's sense of smell is 100 million times stronger than the human. This is a reference to the fact that Slurpuff is based on a dog breed called the Bichon Frise. However, even compared to doggos, Slurpuff has a really strong nose. Sylveon is the lightest evolution, coming in at 51.8 pounds. Dedenne won the Pokemon of the Year in 2021, and it had over 68,000 votes. Now if you take a close look at the Kalos Pokédex, it easily defeated fan favorites like Sylveon and Greninja. Carbink is the only fairy type Pokemon that has the ability Sturdy. Klefki is the only Pokemon that learns the move Fairy Lock. Now what it does is, it prevents all the Pokemon on the field from fleeing, which is very fitting for a key teamed Pokemon. Most legendary Pokemon get a signature move that deals massive damage, but this is not the case for Xerneas. Instead it gets the support move called Geomancy, which charges on the first turn and boosts the special defense, special attack and speed stats all by 2 stages on the next turn. It's very fitting for this Pokemon to get a signature support move since it has a tree and life team. Diancie is the first generation 6 and mythical Pokemon to receive a Mecha evolution. This was during the release of Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Primarina has an outfit in Pokemon Cafe Remix called Elegant Soiree, and it resembles a stage singer. Primarina has elegant clothes and a gold colored microphone. It's also the only event outfit this Pokemon has in the game. I mentioned before that Flabebe and Cutiefly share the same height of 0 foot and 6 inches. But what's funny here is that Cutiefly is actually double the weight of Flabebe. Rabambi and Polteageist are tied for being the shortest fully evolved Pokemon. Morlul and its evolution, Shiinotic, are the only Pokemon that can learn the ability Rain Dish and aren't a water type Pokemon. You see, normally only water types have this ability. Shiinotic is heavily implied to be a counterpart to Parasect. They share the following facts. They both evolve at level 24 and both of them have a base stat total of exactly 405. Finally, they both share the grass typing as well. Comfy is the only Pokemon with the ability Triage, which increases the priority of HP restoring moves to +3. Now there are currently over 29 different HP restoring moves in total, but Comfy can only learn 4 of them, which are the moves Draining Kiss, Floral Healing, Rest and Synthesis. There is a Easter egg in Pokemon Sun and Moon at the Pikachu Valley. If you interact with this specific trailer, normally only Pikachu will appear and run out of the trailer, but there's a really rare chance that Mimikyu appears instead. If that happened, the player will get a question mark above their head and the Mimikyu calmly walks back inside the trailer and disappears forever. The chance of this happening is lower than 1%. Now for some people Mimikyu appears right away, and other players reported it took them thousands of attempts. Tapu Koko appears as a usable Pokeball item in Pokemon Smash Bros. Ultimate. However, the other Tapus are not in this game. Tapu Lele is the shortest and lightest out of the 4 Tapus, coming in at 3 feet and 11 inches in height and 41 pounds in weight. Tapu Bulu appeared way before Pokemon Sun and Moon were released in the games Pokemon X and Y as a small Easter egg. There was an item called the Strange Souvenir that read, an ornament depicting a mysterious Pokemon that has been venerated as a guardian for an extremely long time in the Alola region. Finis translates to the end in the Latin language. Funnily enough, Tapu Fini is the final Tapu you encounter in the Pokemon Sun and Moon games. It lines up well with its name. Maquierna has the signature move Fleur Cannon, which is a really strong move that lowers the special attack stat by 2 stages after attacking. This move is basically Draco Meteor, but for a fairy type. Both the pre-evolutions Hatenna and Hatterene are faster than Hatterene. This is because she evolves into a massive rooted witch that focuses on psychic and fairy type powers, rather than physical movement. The Impidimp evolution line and the Nidoking evolution line are the only 3-stage evolution Pokemon species that can only be 100% male and evolve twice. Morgrem and Grimmsnarl are the only Pokemon that can learn the move False Surrender, and funnily enough the pre-evolution Impidimp isn't able to learn this move. The Pokédex entry from Pokemon Shield says, when Grimmsnarl wraps his hair around its body, it will enchant its muscles and make it extremely strong. This strength can even overwhelm a Machamp, which is crazy since Machamp is known for its insane amount of physical strength. Milcery has the exact same weight and height as Wishiwashi solo form, which is 0 feet 8 inches tall and 0.7 pounds in total weight. For Alcremie, I want to talk about the Ribbon Sweet form. Did you know that there are only a few Pokemon that actively have ribbons in their designs? The most obvious ones are Sylveon and Ribombee, followed by Mecha Diancie, who has 2 long flowing white streamer ribbons. And finally, the Gigantamax form of Alcremie also has a ribbon on top of the wedding cake design. All of these Pokemon I mentioned are fairy types, which makes sense for this typing. Zacian can only equip 2 held items in the game Pokemon Unite. Meanwhile, every other Pokemon can equip 3 held items. Let me quickly explain why it only ends up with 2 held items. There's a Rusted Sword item that Zacian has to equip to enter its crowned sword form. Now this Rusted Sword doesn't give any passive effects or boosts, so you're left with only 2 other items that can actually give boosts. They added this feature to balance out this strong Pokemon. The crowned sword version of Zacian has currently the highest base attack and speed of any fairy type Pokemon. Enamorus is the last Pokemon of the Generation 8 Pokédex, which is very different since most generations end with a mythical Pokemon and not a legendary Pokemon. The Therian form of Enamorus is way slower than the Incarnate form. It switches from a 106 base speed stat all the way down to 46, but it also gains way more defense and special defense. This is because the Therian form represents a black tortoise, which is a creature known for a heavy defense. Fidough shares its category name, the Puppy Pokemon, with 4 other Pokemon, which are Rowlet, Lillipup, Rockruff, and Yamper. Darkspin is currently the only Pokemon with the Well-Baked Body ability, which gives it a fire type immunity, and it also raises the defense stat by 2 stages if it's attacked by a fire type move. The Pokédex entry from Pokemon Scarlet says that Tinkaton swings its handmade hammer to protect itself from danger, but the hammer is often stolen by Pokemon that like to eat metal. The shiny version of Tinkaton changes the color of the hammer from a metallic color to a bronze color, which is the most notable aspect of this Pokemon's design. However, besides that, the body color for this Pokemon changes to a darker shade of pink, which is barely noticeable, and the steel plates on the hips change to a bronze color as well. The Pokédex entry from Pokemon Violet mentions that the hammer Tinkaton is carrying is 220 pounds, which means that the hammer is about 8 times her own body weight, since Tinkaton only weighs 28.7 pounds. Screamtail has the same HP base stat as the original Kanto Jigglypuff, which is 115. Fluttermane is the only fairy type Pokemon that can learn the move Poltergeist. This move can deal really high damage, but only if the opponent has a held item. Iron Valiant can learn the move Spirit Break, a move that can deal damage and lower the opponent's special attack. It is one of the only few physical attack fairy type moves available, and there's only 2 Pokemon that can learn this move. The other Pokemon is Grimmsnarl. Serendipity is 100% male, making it the only bird Pokemon that's male only and doesn't evolve. Let me know your favorite fairy type Pokemon in the comments section. I'm curious which Pokemon is gonna win. And with that said, thanks for watching and I will see you in the next video.